Welcome to Peace at Home Parenting, Facebook Live. And I'm Ruth Freeman, licensed clinical social worker and founder of Peace at Home. I just noticed my dog is in the background, which I didn't really plan on. We're really happy to be here tonight. Our wonderful teachers volunteered to spend a little time with you this evening because we're hearing so much about challenges with teenagers. And I'm going to ask folks to introduce themselves.
My name's Amy Alamar, and I'm trained as a classroom teacher, and my research has been in the area of how do we know what works in the classroom and how we talk with students and use that information toward family and parenting practices. So I've written 2 books on talking with children and using reflective practice in how we use what we know works in the classroom in our day-to-day lives. I'm also parenting 3 teenagers right now for the next couple months. I actually am in that sweet spot with 3 of them. So I'm here right alongside you.
My name is Aaron Weintraub. I'm a teacher with Peace at Home Parenting. I'm the director of Kids Cooperate, and I work in my private practice with children with special social emotional needs and anxiety. And I also have a teenager. I have a just turned 19-year-old. I have a just turned 10-year-old and a just turned 6-year-old.
And I'm Bradford Wiles. I mainly focus on building resilience in vulnerable families through positive parenting practices. I also pursue a lot of work around the intersection of families and health, and I'm a Peace at Home teacher as well, and really glad to be here.
And Bradford's coming from Kansas, Amy's coming from California, and Aaron and I are in Connecticut. How do you help a 15-year-old girl manage her anxiety at the same time her stress continues to build?
I think that I don't want to ignore the question about anxiety, but I just want to add a little nuance to it, in that I think that there's a focus on stress and anxiety through this, and what may be an undercurrent that tends to go unnoticed is grief, particularly in teenagers who are going through anticipated life stages and milestones, sort of are barreling through these at a mile a minute with no opportunity to rewind time. My daughter was a senior in high school at the beginning of this, and didn't have a prom, didn't have a graduation, has spent her first semester in college, remote. And so sometimes we misidentify emotions, and a foundation of grief can cause a lot of the same sort of behavioral things that may look like anxiety or stress, snapping and loss of appetite and changing sleep patterns. And so not to diagnose this viewers with anything, but I think that it adds an important nuance to the conversation when we can really understand what our teenagers are feeling.
Many family members are grieving, and it may look like irritability. And so our interactions now become a little more stressed, and we're so upset about the losses our kids are having that we may be trying to fix it or make it better. And you can actually make your kids nervous when you're trying to fix their feelings.
Yeah.
So you could be making things more complicated and not realizing it because it's so painful to watch them have these big losses.
I was just about to say that sometimes I use this term, which can be kind of painful to listen to, but sometimes we need to let them hurt and let them see that they can get through it. So we certainly don't want to take for granted if it's severe red flags, like Aaron was saying, if it's severe loss of weight, gaining of weight, change of diet of any sort, changing in sleep habits. We want to keep an eye on those red flags, certainly if they're expressing depression. But anxiety is normal in all humans, and sometimes it helps us thrive, and especially at this adolescent stage where they're going through so many changes with or without a pandemic. They're just racing through these changes, and it's a really nice thing when they know they can handle it. So sometimes just being the soundboard and not fixing it and just saying, it sounds like you're really stressed out. Do you want to talk about it? Or is there somebody you want to talk to about it? Kind of offering them, whether that be a friend, another family member, or maybe they do want professional help, right? There's no shame ever in asking for help. And we're trying to model and teach that to them. And so I think it's resisting that urge to fix, which we all fall victim to, because watching your child hurt is the most painful thing.
And there's plenty to be worried about right now. I mean, it's kind of it's a confusing time. And I think that, we call it reflective listening in the field, but it means just, you sound really worried about that. You seem kind of nervous about this. One of the manifestations that I've seen in parents and in kids from this is a kind of anxiety called perfectionism. And parents are really worried about their kids keeping up their grades, and they're trying to make sure everything's happening right. And just today, I was talking to an advisory group, and one of the moms on the advisory group put her son on the line, and they said, "Do you want to ask him anything?" And I said, "Well, what do you need from your parents right now?" And he said, "I need space. I need them to stop worrying about me." And so I think it's hard for us to know if we're worried or they're worried. Now, there are clear-cut anxiety symptoms. Kids can do self-harm. Kids can have difficulty focusing. And when that's happening, you want to get a medical consultation and look at, do we need cognitive behavioral therapy? Do we need, medicine? And you do want to get a consultation, and you can do that through telehealth. But first, really listen carefully to their accounting of the whole thing. I just talked to a parent this year, and she had an extraordinarily talented kid who had terrible social skills. She was super, super smart. And she wasn't getting the grades she always got. And this is her junior year. I said, you could think about a gap year and focus on what she really wants to learn. And we have to think outside the box to help our kids be okay. And kids, teenagers, are tremendous thinkers outside the box. And if we invite them to come up with solutions, I think it's going to help. What do you do when your 13-year-old girl continues to sneak things?
This is always, these questions are always amusing in some regards, because it makes us realize and remember what we were like and what we did. And so for me, one of the things that I think about when we're asked these questions is exactly that, remembering and putting ourselves in our teens' shoes and understanding that we were not perfect. I am a recovering perfectionist. So when we were talking earlier about that need to be that, it takes some of our own introspection. So I would start there with these things of, okay, so first, think about why you might have done those things, and then also have that conversation about why those things are happening. And you're gonna sometimes get, well, I don't know, or because, or all the things that we also said back. But persistence is really helpful, and even if you don't get the actual answer to that, continuing to be present and to be engaged and asking can be really helpful. You don't want to be overbearing. Nobody likes to be quizzed, but you also want to be available and allow that opportunity for interaction. And over time, the likelihood that you'll be able to make some headway is much greater if you're making those small investments.
I think too, especially now when some of us are still sheltering in place or doing some version of that, there's a real need for privacy. And so sneaking things is a very natural thing anyway for a teenager. And right now we all need a little privacy. So as much as you can, if that means giving them a little more privacy on social media, or a little more privacy, in the house, in a space, or letting them find a space outside of the house, that can help, because it's a very natural thing to want. We want our privacy. And I was sort of giggling because we all did, as Bradford said, we've all done things, right, that maybe we wished our parents hadn't known. And maybe it's okay that we don't know everything that our kids do. Like, you probably don't want to be privy to all of the conversations. It would probably make your head spin. So kind of just acknowledging that privacy and allowing for it, and assuming good intentions. They may do something bad. When you say sneak, it could be not telling you something. It could be lying about something, right? But let's assume good intentions. They're not doing it to hurt you. They're doing it for a reason. Either they don't want you upset, they know you'll be upset, so they're not telling you, or they're ashamed, or for whatever reason. So assuming good intentions and starting the conversation there. It doesn't mean you have to be happy about it, but it means like, oh, okay, I'm going to assume you didn't mean to hurt me, but I noticed X, Y, or Z. Right.
Yeah. And this mom is saying, I'm afraid her sneaking things can lead to her sneaking more outside the home in a world full of horrible people. So you can imagine she might be talking to her daughter like the world's a really scary place, and her daughter might not feel that way. and she might be reacting. Sometimes when parents tell me the kids are lying, I sometimes ask the question, are you very strict? Is someone very judgmental? Is someone very nervous? Because kids sometimes will hide things if things are kind of strict. But I also want to say, it depends on what they're sneaking, and sometimes it can be dangerous. My stepson pointed out my daughter walking out of the house with a Coke one day and said, "Why don't you smell that Coke?" And there was rum in it. She had just like put rum into a can of Coca-Cola, and he was a little bit older than her, and I was like, oh, she was sneaking it, and her sneaking that out and getting into a car is a dangerous situation. If she's just sneaking it, it's still not great, but it's a little different. So it's what the child is sneaking. But also, I really like, there's a website called Lives in the Balance by Ross Green. And he has a process there called digging down. And he basically just gives you some words like, we have a problem. I see that you're walking out of the house and you've put some alcohol in your soda. Help me understand what the deal is here. Help me understand what motivated this and how you think it's safe. And I feel scared because you might get into a car accident. So let's talk about how we're going to handle this going forward. It's not, oh my God, what are you doing? Which is what certainly I wanted to say. And I think that, Ross Green's digging down, Allie just posted livesinthebalance.org. Look for the parents' resources, digging down. And I think we have some handouts about this if you email us at info@peaceathomeparenting.com. But mostly this is about an open-ended problem-solving situation. We have a problem. You've done a behavior that's dangerous. Help me understand it. And how can we solve it? This is much more productive than flipping out and telling her how catastrophic this is.
Thinking about what the behavior is on a continuum of catastrophic versus sort of normative, rebellious, or privacy-seeking behaviors, or
doing something thrilling.
Yeah, right. Risk-taking, these kinds of things. So recognizing that. That they could be indicators, but they could also just be behaviors in and of themselves. Meaning, yes, I understand the concern that they will sneak out and endanger themselves or you and everyone else. But recognizing that sometimes, you sneak some screen time or some other forbidden fruit, and that's it, right? And making sure that reaction isn't so harsh that first they can't come to you with more serious issues, and then secondly that they won't begin to then hide everything from you, and that can get really ugly really quickly. So keeping that level head, I think, is really the most important, and it's very hard to do. So taking a breath, counting to 5 before you engage, those things are. We're
saying I'll talk to you about this in 5 minutes. I have to calm down.
Yeah. There you go. I've said for a long time, if I could get parents to just wave if I could wave a magic wand, just having there be intentionality in what they're doing in reaction to these things, that would go a long way. And so that's your gold right there, being able to pause and recognize that you might not be ready to handle what's in front of you.
In our thinking brain, not in our emotional brain. And that's why we always remind parents the 5 minutes a day of a brain calming practice.
What we're talking about is more presentation and the way you talk to your child about it. What we're not saying is that it's not okay. That conversation doesn't have to be a negotiation. It's okay to set limits. And, I always say 80% roses, 20% thunderbolts. Sometimes love comes, as being stern when you need to be. And I think, we all sort of chuckled. We've all got a story of doing something like that because sneaky is a natural stage of development. And the other piece of that side of that story is the interaction we had when we were caught. We all remember either being shamed or understood or, winked, and boys will be boys, and, in some cases. And so just, I think the intentionality comes from realizing you're in that moment where you're making that memory for your child.
For the parents out there that haven't kept a level head or did enter a conversation in fear, which is normal, right? Like, and it's, I agree with Bradford and Ruth on that. We've got to keep a level head as best we can, but also know that you can always return to a conversation. So if you're not proud of the way you handled it, it's okay to say, you know what? I lost my cool because I was scared, because I freaked out, because you did something dangerous, right? So like, it's okay. And don't label yourself, oh, I'm such a bad mom or dad or whomever. Just learn from it and move on. And that models what Aaron's talking about. Like, you are modeling that resilience right there, and coming back to it.
Yeah. And with teenagers, I mean, I have actually said, so tell me what consequence is going to help you remember not to put yourself in danger like this next time. You can actually invite them to make the boundary, or you can make the boundary. And these are two different things. There's the boundary, and there's the and there's the connection and understanding and problem solving. But at the bottom, those boundaries can be very important. But being 13 isn't the same as it was when I was a kid. Now it's easier for predators to reach kids. That's what my fear is not. That's why my fear is not normal sneaking. So if kids are sneaking on the internet, maybe that's what this mom's talking about, and they're doing it in a dangerous way, then you have to move in and supervise. And what you do is you move in. My stepson used to tell lies all the time. And what I did for a period of time was I checked every single thing he told me. So if you have a kid that's really gone around the boundaries on the internet, you're going to supervise 100%, and then you're going to give them what the indicators are of safety, and you're going to back up as they show you the indicators of safety. Whenever you're creating a consequence for a kid, you're always telling them what they have to do to win your
trust.
Yeah, to win the privilege back, and be very concrete and specific.
Sometimes the internet can feel like a whole new world, but I think we can apply the same principles. What I tell parents is, even with younger kids, is if it's a situation where you wouldn't leave your kid alone unsupervised, then don't leave them unsupervised. If you wouldn't, if it's a chat room with other 6-year-olds, maybe you'd leave your kid unsupervised, but maybe not if somebody could walk in through the door when you weren't looking and be part of that conversation. As they become teenagers, if you'd let them go to a party by themselves without knowing who was there, give them that open trust until they show that you can't. But you can create a in real life analog to help you work through some of these challenges and figuring out how much to supervise and how much to let go.
This is such a complicated time, and it helps to just go outside yourself and get some consultation. Don't do it alone. So we have a good question. How do you deal with the continual requests of attending events that were normal pre-COVID that are not attainable now, even though other parents are allowing these events, sleepovers, birthday parties? Mm-hmm. This is a tough one.
Personally, it's a consistent thing in your own family, and you have to be comfortable. Like anything, some parents let their kids drink alcohol before they're 21. Some parents let their kids go to parties without parents present. So you have to make the decision. If this is something your family doesn't allow, then this is something our family simply doesn't allow, and it hurts, and it's a bummer, and life is hard, and constantly, you will not find me in a class where I don't talk about the importance of gratitude and noting what you do have as an antidote to these things. Because the more you truly practice gratitude and know what you have, the better sense of self-satisfaction you have. And this will go true for your children. So it's not like, well, there are starving people, so you should eat. It's not that kind of gratitude. It's, you know what? I know this is painful. I want to go out too. But because of X, Y, or Z, right? Pre-existing conditions or whatever your rules are, we've made this decision as a family. But are there things we can do? Are there safe ways we can approach it? Can I help support some other thing that will make you happy? I know virtually attending a sleepover is not cool, but can we do it? Can you go to their window and serenade them as a surprise, right? Are there things we can do to help you get through this moment? Because it's back to what Aaron said. They are grieving. Teenagers are probably feeling it the hardest. The graduations, the dances, the quiet moments between classes. They don't have any of those moments to develop as adults, and this is their moment.
This is why it's so difficult. The teenage brain is programmed to seek their tribe. Kids are literally being cued by their brains to find their people. And the reason that's happening is because having that group of peers is part of launching successfully. So they acting like their life depends on these social situations, to some degree, is actually true. They need it to be successful. And their brain also tells them to do things that makes them feel good. Never in any other developmental stage does the brain cue you to do stuff that feels good as much as during adolescence. And the brain cues them to do things that are new, innovative, and risky. And when you put this formula together, it's do things that are risky, make you feel good, and do it with your friends. So this is why a psychiatrist who I love says adolescence is a disease you hope your kid recovers from. And it's just a time where there's amazing creativity and passion. Sometimes the emotional part of their brains literally disconnect from the thinking part of their brains. There's so much going on. And 1 minute they might be completely logical and make complete sense. And 2 seconds later, they're just a ball of mush. And you as the parent are getting triggered around your own memories from adolescence. So you're having feelings in reaction to all this. I had taught parenting education for, 15 years by the time my daughter was 15. And I cried all the time. It didn't matter what I knew. The relationship stuff is huge. It's huge. So it makes sense that they're having a hard time right now if you think about what their brain wants to do.
When we're under stress, we default to how we were parented, right? That we tend to, at our foundational, in those snap moments, default to how we were parented. And oftentimes that's suboptimal because we, it's not always. Some of us were parented very well and are very happy with that. And that's great. But typically, where you see people really grapple are in those really stressful, high intensity moments, and they tend to default to experiences that frankly weren't all that good for them. So getting back to Amy's point of revisiting, making sure that you process that and saying and recognizing like, oh yeah, I did exactly what I wished my parent hadn't done, not only at the time but in retrospect, right? Because at the time we never really understand what our parents are doing, but then that's my second point, which is helping them understand that in this case in particular, that it's about their safety, right? That it's one thing to be concerned about that someone's gonna make fun of them, or and those things are bad, don't get me wrong, but this is their actual physical health and safety, and yours and that of essentially everyone. And so being able to talk with your children about that is really important. But I also want to recognize that, we need to balance our physical health with our social emotional health, and understand that there is a balance there, that it's not just one or the other, because neither one of those is beneficial for us. A lot of what we've been talking about is Pauline Boss has a lot of work on ambiguous loss. So getting back to the grieving and the things that our teenagers are missing out on, but they're not quite sure of what they're missing out on. Like they know it's prom, but they don't really know what prom is. They know it's homecoming, but they don't really know what that is. And graduation and those things. That's all kind of this really nagging sense of ambiguous loss. And so if you just do a search for ambiguous loss, there's some really good stuff on Pauline Boss's website.
One thing you can start with when you're talking about the boundaries, the physical boundaries, is asking your child, what do you understand about this virus and the contagiousness of it? Tell me what you understand about the risks. Tell me what you understand about what's dangerous about it. And tell me how you're thinking about how a sleepover could be safe. And it's really inviting them to think these things through. And then you share, well, my understanding is this. This is my source of information. What's your source of information? So it's a kind of a process. In the end, you're going to make some rules, and you're going to tell them why, and that's going to be the end of it. But at adolescence, I think this conversation is very important. And I think that, you really want to see it from their point of view. You want to get their point of view, and you want to honor that it is important for them to see their friends. And you're going to do everything you can to make it safe. And let's figure out how to solve the problem and stay safe at the same time. And they're going to have great ideas if you don't just, this is the rules and shut it down. That's not going to be helpful.
Yeah, I would invite the kids into the conversation always about any boundaries. I also just want to put a shout out here too. Like, we're making an assumption because of the question. It's about how do we tell them they can't do this when others do. But if you are in a family where you are being more lenient and that is okay for your family, I just want to make a point that we don't want to judge too harshly, right? Everybody is making the decision that makes them feel best, and nobody has the right answer. This is pretty much true across the board with parenting. There is no one way to do it. And so we really want to be mindful. I find myself being like, I wonder why they're doing that, or I can't believe, but actually everybody has their own limits, and we all do things that other people would find questionable. So the more we judge their friends or their friends' families, the more they won't share with us. And so we want to try, we're human, we judge, but we want to try to refrain from sharing it all the time and just say, asking those questions, like Ruth said, asking the questions, well, this is why we're doing it this way, and this is what makes me concerned. And I think that can be very helpful.
If you have a difficult conversation you want to have, you say, is this a good time? I want to talk about this issue. Is this a good time? And I think that will help with kids too, and say, you know, I want to talk about this. Is this a good time for you? And respecting it. Now you can say, we're going to talk about it sometime today, but, you know, you can pick a time later, or you can do it now. And, you know, Amy, you talk about time and tone and
setting.
You know, where are we going to have this conversation? And this is something that parents often just seem to disregard. I mean, I see parents admonishing their kids in public in front of their friends, and setting is huge. Where are we going to have this conversation? And when parents honor this, you know, they don't want their little sister around when they're talking about this or something. You don't know that. But, you know, where's the best place for us to talk about this decision? And, you know, paying attention to your tone. And you know, I think courting kids, those teenagers are not always going to be respectful. And the challenge for us is to be respectful. So according them respect is going to go, I think, some distance. And when kids are not being respectful, respecting yourself and removing yourself. So it's super simple. You're just saying, can we talk about this calmly? No, you're horrible. Okay, I'm going to take 5. And you're taking care of yourself. And you don't give the kid the opportunity to fall apart and become horrible. Because typically what happens when they become disrespectful, your brain goes into this emotional state, and all of a sudden you're responding in this aggressive way, none of which is going to be helpful.
But the other thing that I'm hearing from a lot of the families I work with is the opposite side of that problem, which is that their teenagers aren't doing anything. They're not seeing anybody. They're not engaging. They're not engaging in online opportunities. They're not using this to better themselves, which is what a lot of us wish they would be doing. And so how to support your child when they may have totally cut themselves off.
That's really common. I'm hearing that a lot. And I mean, one thing I say to parents is insist on a meal a day. You know, just have a meal and make sure the kid gets out of their room for a meal. And I think this is another one of those digging down conversations. You know, you really, you want to sit with the kid and say, I see that you're staying in your room. Help me understand it. What happens when you come out of your room? How does it feel? And it from the inside, what they're experiencing.
Yeah, and I would encourage parents also to think about things that might have been unpalatable before the pandemic. So playing video games, you know, as a social activity, might be much more appealing now, right? And I mean, there, you know, it can depend completely on your orientation towards them, but you know, those kinds of things that might have been not how you wanted to see your child spend his or her time, can actually have quite a bunch of benefit at this point, where you would have been like, hey, here's a ball, go outside and play, you know, with your friends till the sun goes down, right? Like that. If that's not your orientation and you want to you know, keep your family socially isolated, then finding ways to adjust to that and recognizing your own barriers to helping them achieve some of those social elements. I mean, I do want to say I love the virtual world. It requires more effort than just showing up. Whereas when we're together in person, you can be pretty comfortable and confident in just showing up. But here, it takes much more effort to be engaged. And so, particularly for introverts, that can be even more challenging because they're not getting that reflexive time for themselves in the context of what's going on. They're sort of already isolated.
So follow your plan, not your mood, is the first step of that, because your brain is going to tell you, make a million excuses not to follow through with whatever it is that you decided to engage with. And then the other is that oftentimes this change, sort of contrary to a lot of the advice that we all love to give, comes from the outside in. So you have no control over your feelings. You have less control over your thoughts than we feel like we do. What we can control is our actions. And so do something different to feel something different, creating a virtuous cycle so that you have to sort of like get in there and try something new. And then you start to look for those experiences. You start to open up to some of those previously unpalatable strategies like Bradford just mentioned. What I was just doing with the kids that I work with before I got on here was we're making a bucket list. We're making a list of things that we wanted to do, experiences we wanted to have, and if somebody wants to go to, I had one kid who wanted to photograph Chernobyl in the winter. And that's not something we're doing in the pandemic probably, but I found online, I put together a virtual field trip, and we looked at photos, we watched a video. There's VR experiences that you can get into. You can go deep with it. And so think about ways that you can, that their wildest dreams can be a jumping off point for something small and practical.
And I think you can set some non-negotiables, Ruth. You absolutely can, as you would anytime. And they can have choice within it. We struggle with that. I have 2 children who love to be athletic, and I have one who does not. And so it's like, okay, you got to do 30 minutes. What's it going to be? And we have tried so many things, and I'm doing them with them, to try to encourage it, but it has to happen because otherwise we become too sedentary. So I think you can have some non-negotiables. You can eat together. That's a good thing. And then allow them some choice.
Yeah.
And in the case of eating together, there's a tremendous body of evidence, of research evidence about how beneficial that is. And it doesn't have to be the evening meal either, right? It can be in the morning. It can be a snack. It's getting together and spending that time together. And at first with your teens, they're going to sit there most likely and not say a word or protest being there and not eat, not say anything, but so adding on, both Amy and Aaron have mentioned their timing and their settings and how they go. For me, one of the things I emphasize the most is that persistence, right? That it's trying this again and again and again and again. And one thing that we have as adults that is such a blessing, but that really only comes with wisdom, is that we can just outlast them, right? I mean, you can just do it. You can do it. And that is something that I really encourage parents, the parents that I'm working with a lot, around recognizing that these things are processes. It's not like you just get to set this rule and then suddenly, that's the law and everybody obeys it, right? Like that's not how any of this works. And so being persistent and continuing to just be consistent and persistent is
you're going to come, and it's okay if you're unhappy about it. And before we go, I just want to highlight something Amy talked about, and that was gratitude. And gratitude can sound very, crunchy granola, but there's actually a whole body of research about it. And the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley University talks about this. In our house, we always held hands before a meal and said one thing we appreciate about the day. We started this when the kids were little. You can do a gratitude journal with kids, whatever. But when you do a daily practice of gratitude, you literally change your brain to start searching for the positive. Our brains are built. If you're not doing any practices, your brain collects negative experiences better than positive ones. You remember negative experiences better, and you focus on them more in any situation. You walk into the house, the dishes are in the dishwasher, but the counter's messy. What do you talk about? You talk about the messy counter. So if you're doing any kind of gratitude practices yourself, that's going to help because you're going to see what's going right with your kids. And what you're talking to them about should be mostly what's going right, noticing any progress, any effort, any positive stuff right now. Even if they're feeling down, even if they're grieving, it's okay to notice what's right. And maybe building something in, even if they completely complain, building something in where, once a day you each say something you appreciated about that day. It literally can change everything.
And it's an opportunity to connect to that social brain too, because I think that the things to notice are the helpers and the people who are doing the things that make their quarantine as it is. I think sometimes it can feel a little bit forced to start a gratitude process, but a child who can't feel gratitude can't feel love. They can't notice love from people around them. If they think about a young child who goes to the fridge and gets an apple and they feel like, I got that apple for myself. And then with wisdom comes a sense of, well, it didn't appear there magically. Somebody worked to put it there. And my parents went to work and somebody grew the apple and somebody drove it here. And then the earth supported the apple plant. And then the greater your expanse of gratitude goes, the more love that you're able to notice and feel. And so it's a really, maybe the most important lesson to teach your child. And right now, you're training on hard ground here because there's a lot to notice. Our brain is able to pick up those problems everywhere we look. But if you can learn a gratitude practice and make it in part of your child's life during this difficult time, boy, they're going to really have that for their whole lives.
Yeah, and it means you need to practice it yourself. I mean, notice what you're noticing in yourself. Notice, your internal dialogue affects this. I just want to get a comment here. Yes, a new set of expectations and a more flexible schedule. Unfortunately, the live video games is now their safe social time. It took me some time to see and accept that with new limits. Once I did, we were all happier. My teens needed me to accept the new type of social time. And Aaron, you speak very well about, we have to talk about screen time now, like we talk about food, healthy right. Screen time. Can you
don't talk about screen time at all anymore. It's screen usage versus screen time. Yeah, and the analogy that Ruth you were getting was if we were trying to develop a healthy relationship with food, it wouldn't make any sense to talk about the time we spent eating, because we have a more nuanced understanding that some food is healthier than others, and the same thing goes for screen consumption.
I also think letting go of expectations, sometimes this comment says, I think that's just key. You should let go of expectations. Where's a conversation going to go? What is the limit going to be? Like, really have a conversation about it and don't expect, okay, well, we're going to talk and then I'm going to tell you how much time you're going to spend on the computer. It's really like, oh, all right, tell me why this is valuable. And believe me, we all are watching things that I would say are not high quality at this point in our family, and we're having fun. So I've let go of the expectation that it's all going to be PG-13, right? And that's an okay thing, so long as you're talking about it, so long as you're experiencing it together to some degree, and they understand why you had some of those limits. So I think, applaud you deeply for allowing that, because I think, first of all, these video games that I know nothing about are super social, and those kids are the most sociable now. And also, like, it's probably a little bit scary to you. And I just think, you deserve so much credit for letting that go where your son needed it to go.
We have a question here. With kids having 6+ hours of screen time for school, how do you measure their fun screen time?
School is not fun screen time.
She's saying kids having
so anything after that you are engaging with them. And so when I think about fun screen time, when we think about usage, I think very much about all the things that if you're doing something collaboratively, that's quality screen time. That's quality screen usage, right? So if you're watching something and talking about it and engaging around it, that's good. That's good. You're forming a relationship around it. If you're just sitting there looking at it and it's playing and you're not having any sort of interaction, that's consumption that is not healthy, right? Much like the food analogy that Aaron used. And so for me, and the school, if they're doing remote learning, Like that's work. So we need to think about that as work, right? Like when we come home, all of us, or when we're done working, if we pick up our screens and look at sports scores or whatever, get on Facebook or Twitter, whatever it is, like that's not work anymore. And so that's leisure. So thinking about it as at least from as I interpret this question, that for me is that the learning component is a capsule, a delivery method of education that doesn't encapsulate screen usage in any way for me.
How much is too much on the screen time? And I think what I would say is that we think of the screen as a thing that has positive or negative effects. But I think it makes more sense if we break it down into what the potential negative effects are, which are really eye strain and inactivity and social isolation. Those are the main three things. And so working to mitigate those, then you don't have to worry about what they're doing with the screen when. Make sure that their eyes, so the eye strain comes from looking at a screen for a whole time. That's a real thing. So making sure that they're spending some time away from the screen, taking healthy breaks, getting outside, having face-to-face conversations, moving their bodies. And so if you can mitigate the specific negative effects of being inert through your whole day, then you don't have to worry about the delivery device for the education or entertainment like Bradford was mentioning.
And the time. And I want to, I just want to, I'm the old-fashioned person on this team. And I just want to say that, Bruce Perry, in his wonderful book called Born for Love, says that when we look someone in the eye, the stress hormones go down, the feel-good biochemicals go up, and it's essential that you're looking your kids in the eye. It's okay to have these interactive screen time experiences, but there needs to be parts of the day where you either sit at a meal or you're just talking. You're seeing each other's eyes. You're taking them in. You're seeing them without screens. And Aaron, sometimes you talk about having screen-free spaces, like the dining room table is a screen-free space, and having screen-free times. So, there's a couple of hours in the day where from 11 to 1, no screens for anybody. It's downtime. It's no screens. Let's do this. So it's screen-free times and screen-free spaces, just as a way of organizing the day. And a question that I want to ask kids, a thing that concerns me, is how do you get comfort? What do you do to get comfort? Now, many, many, many kids are getting comfort from screens now, and that's okay. But I need, and Aaron, this might be old-fashioned, you're going to tell me, but I need for a kid to have another way to get comfort besides a video game. I need them to be able to say, well, when I go outside and, throw the basket around, or when I call my friend and talk to her, I don't know. I always consider that one of the addiction things. Aaron, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, just that, like one of our classic most important tools is modeling. I'd say start by asking yourself where you're getting your comfort from. And if it's a glass of wine, then maybe everybody in the family needs to rethink how to stay centered during this difficult time.
Yeah.
And that can be a conversation that you all have, and start some new habits together.
Great.
Right. And I would, I think I would give a great example of screen as delivery. So, for example, if you wanted to put up instructional videos of how to learn to dance with your child, right, your teenager, right? So there's no let's just say where you are, dance studios are shut down, right? But there are so many dance instruction videos, right? You put that up on your screen, you're standing there next to each other. The screen is there, you learn from it, you practice these moves, you're touching each other, you're moving, you're obviously not sedentary, and you're laughing, you're making mistakes, you're being human. Like you can do that for hours.
And if you're doing this with your teenager, just FYI.
What's that?
You're dancing by yourself if you're doing this.
And you might, and that, yes, and you might. But again, modeling is critical. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, in that instance, the screen as a delivery method, like it does that, there's no screen time, like that doesn't count because it's just a part of what's going on, right? And but to your point, Amy, some of these things,
It's the healthy screen use.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Get off screen too.
Yeah. My last comment is offer yourselves some grace. Forgive yourselves. You're gonna make mistakes. Your children are gonna make mistakes. And then the thing that I keep coming back to now is, if you talk to anyone who's had children who have left their house, they will always say it goes by in the blink of an eye, right? It goes. Everyone says it. It's so cliche. It's the most cliche thing there is. And here we have this opportunity to spend more time with our teenagers than we will ever spend with them again, ever. I mean, I promise you. And so, recognizing that there are all these stressors, all these things going on, recognize that you're never going to get an opportunity like this again. And so, doing the very best you can to make that quality will just, it will pay off in so many different ways. It is hard, but it is worth it.
Yeah, I agree. It's wonderful. And get to know your kids. Like you're raising some adults in the world that are going to do some amazing things. So ask them questions.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that comes up for me as we're talking, is to stay curious about your child. You know them really well, but they're evolving and changing every moment, and stay open and curious, and just be, those questions are great. Aaron, Amy, Bradford, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.